Today I want to talk to you about the concept of raising your vibration. Whereas one cannot turn up their frequency like a knob, or else you might sit there like a knob, thereby, ooh, now I'm in a high vibe. What really changed? If you focus on how you feel, your physical sensations, your body, if you're cold, in fact, is a good step, is to realize if you're cold or warm. And within that realization of your temperature, one can find themselves in a very physical and very acute sense of themselves. So I would regard that as step one on a process whereby you take steps up the vibratory ladder. Since now that you can feel your warmth, you can move into how you emotionally feel about that warmth. And in a sense, because that emotional sense is something that interpermeates reality itself and exists almost above everything in a sense of hierarchy, and in a sense of how we manipulate this place, we do it through our emotions, through our drive, our creativity, but by noticing how we feel, we then bring ourselves into a higher vibration in that sense, because our consciousness is now focusing on a part of the universe that is so high frequency that you can only see what it means. Unless you've trained your spiritual eyes, that's another time. Which brings us to either the experience of the power of those emotions or the realization of the understanding of those emotions. The state of understanding the outside world through how we feel and what we experience physically then becomes a state within which we perceive reality from a higher perspective than what most people do, which is they walk about thinking that they understand. Until the moment that you truly understand, you never will. And it's more of an experience than a thought, as you might understand what I'm saying. Above this understanding sits a certain level of love, which drives us to understand certain things, and think about certain things, and think in a certain way. And the certainty of how we think becomes such a demeanor within ourselves, to almost say that it's our loving nature to express a beautiful side of how we think, through how we feel, and then on our faces at least smile. One might get a weird smile out of it, I don't know. But there's confidence in that. And that's yet another level. And yes, these are the chakras, but that's why we're climbing. And as we climb, we realize that the steadfast resolve behind enjoying what you're perceiving is a place within consciousness within which we can perceive with clarity. And we find ourselves sitting in this clarified space with the final acknowledgement of the self-understanding that permeates this whole experience. The self that watches the perceptions, the self that receives the perceptions and interprets them, the self that expresses and loves and thinks and feels and does. this self is to be loved itself. And only then, and it should never be difficult, and only then, and if it is difficult, then I understand. And I hope you do too, and namaste. But only then will we loop again, and we find the divine ground, where we settle back again into how we feel about ourselves, particularly, and we come back to the body. And we recognize that that is the self. And then we recognize how we feel about that. Off of how we feel about that, forming a thought, falling in love with that line of thinking, becoming confident in that love, realizing that we're perceiving this, realizing that we are perceiving this, loving that self, and so then again it loops, as that self then becomes this great otherness, but you can decide how you feel about that from there, and as that self, decide how you feel, and again, think a thought, fall in love with that thought, become confident in it, realize your perception of it, and you're back to yourself again. And it keeps moving up and up and up and up, all the way to infinity. We all come back when we go to sleep, and so shall we all awake again.